Hey everyone, sorry it's been a while since I made a video, but I promise I have a good excuse. Most full-timers in the winter become what they call snowbirds. This is where you migrate south where it's warm because, that makes sense. But I decided I really wanted to photograph the snow on the mountains this winter. So I ended up spending almost a whole month in Colorado. I spent quite a bit of time in Rocky Mountain National Park, hiking and snowshoeing up into the alpine lakes. It's an undescribable beauty. The snow brings some kind of peace that you really can't understand until you experience it. There was one morning where I tried to photograph sunrise over this lake called Dream Lake in Rocky Mountain National Park. So I left really early and I started snowshoeing in. It's almost impossible to describe the feeling of hiking through a forest of untouched fresh snow. But the one problem with being the first one to hike a trail is that there's no tracks to follow. So I might have gotten just a little bit off track. I finally made it. Okay, so I may not have taken the best route up here. I might have gotten a little bit sidetracked, but I finally made it. And I think it's worth it. It was so freaking cold. Having to get my hands out, even with glove liners, to operate my camera was so hard. One of my other favorite hikes I did this winter is super easy to get to. It's off of I-70 and it's up to this lake called Hanging Lake. It's only about a mile and a half up, but you get to follow these falls all the way up to this lake, and it's so beautiful. When I got to the top, the falls were partially frozen and there was a really thin layer of ice, and you could see right through this really clear water. And probably my favorite thing to shoot this winter was the Maroon Bells. In the summer you can drive all the way up to the Bells, but in the winter they close the road. So I woke up at 3:30 in the morning, I got bundled up, and I took a snowmobile as far as you can take it to the Bells. After that, I snowshoed just a little bit further in to get to the spot I wanted to shoot from. If there's one thing I could tell you to add to your bucket list, it would be to stand in front of these majestic mountains in the middle of winter, watch the sunrise, and listen to the complete silence around you. I can't think of a better way I could have ended and begun my new year. But in order to do all of these awesome winter activities, I had to learn a thing or two about winter camping. So I thought I'd share a few tips that I happened to learn while I was on the road, which brings me to why I'm standing exactly where I'm standing right now. I had a wonderful streak of 217 days on the road without staying in, a Walmart parking lot. Which brings me to tip number 1 of winter camping, which is always check the forecast and road conditions of where you're going. Tip number 2 is super obvious but super important. Dress in layers. A lot of people think I look like a crazy gypsy in ridiculous clothing traveling around in a teardrop trailer, but I'm warm. A lot of people have been asking me what I do to stay warm in the winter, so I wanted to show you guys a few things that I do to stay warm. Well, the best situation is when I have shore power, which is when I'm plugged into electricity. Every now and then I'll stop at a campground that has electricity, but I am super grateful to have so many friends that will let me crash on their driveways, and if I ask super nicely, they'll let me run an extension cord and plug it into their house. So when I have electricity, I have this great little ceramic heater. It was like 20 bucks at an outdoor store. If I turn this little heater on for 5 minutes, it will be a sauna in here. But as many of you know, I like to boondock a little bit and get off grid. So when I don't have electricity, I do have this little propane heater right here. Mr. Heater makes a couple of indoor safe propane heaters, and this is the smaller of the two. The propane heater is a little bit awkwardly shaped, and there's not really a great place to put it in the teardrop, and it's also not quite as warm as the electric heater. But regardless of what heating source you're using, tip number 3, always crack your ceiling vent, even when it's freezing outside. 1, for safety, and 2, because you're gonna wake up in the morning to ice crystals from the condensation of your breath all over your doors and windows. If it's gonna be crazy cold out and you're not gonna have electricity, tip number 4, invest in a really good down sleeping bag. These things can keep you warm to sub-zero temps, and there's nothing wrong with having an awesome sleeping bag in a teardrop. Tip number 5, if you're anything like me and you have terrible circulation, hand and toe warmers can be your best friends. They're sort of ridiculously expensive if you buy them individually, but I found out you can go to Costco and get them in bulk for crazy cheap. The last piece of advice I would leave you with is not to let your brain get in the way. Don't let the cold scare you off, because there is truly a winter wonderland out there waiting to be explored. And I would just hate for anybody to miss that beauty of winter. So happy winter camping, stay warm, love and light.